Cancer loves acid.
In this video, renowned health expert Barbara O'Neill discussed 8 acid-forming foods we should aim to avoid to help create a healthier environment in the body, enabling it to naturally defend against cancer and other illnesses. And stay tuned, because next time we'll learn about 7 alkaline-forming foods that we should mainly consume to keep cancer away from our body. As a quick reminder, let's review why it's essential to maintain a healthy pH balance in our body.
The pH of the human body is important because at different pHs, diseases grow, and at different pHs, it's very hard for disease to grow. And blood's reading on the pH scale is between 7.35 and 7.4. But in a cellular pH of 5.5, this is where disease thrives, especially yeasts, funguses, and cancer. Cancer loves acid. Cancer also loves no oxygen. The other thing cancer loves is sugar. And so when people come to us wanting help to conquer cancer, you see what we do? We suggest a diet that's highly alkalizing. We suggest ways to oxygenate the body. And we also greatly eliminate the glucose, the sugars going into the body.
What is an acid-forming food?
Let's have a look at acid-forming foods now. These acid-forming foods are high in the acid-forming minerals, which is phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine.
Meat is first.
So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine? Meat. This explains why Dr. Colin Campbell found he could turn cancer cells on and off like a switch by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats.
Red meat and processed meat are among the most prevalent acid-forming foods in the Western diet. Red meat contains high levels of protein and phosphorus, which contribute to increased acidity in the body. Following that is wheat, the second acid-forming food, particularly in its hybridized form.
The hybridization of the wheat created a lot more of the acid-forming minerals.
Given that wheat plays a significant role in most of our diets, it's important to explore the underlying issues associated with it more thoroughly.
The original wheat that God made is called Enkenhorn, or some call it just Enkhorn. And that original wheat had a very fragile protein or gluten structure. It is not sure when, but they estimate a couple of thousand years ago, Enkenhorn did a wild hybrid with a field grass and came up with the Emma strain of wheat. Its structure, its protein or gluten structure is not as fragile, but it's still fairly fragile. And in the 1950s, it was the Emma strain of wheat that was put through intensive crossbreeding. And it came up with the hybridized wheat that we know today. That hybridization of the wheat created an incredibly complex gluten or protein structure. Today we're looking at how the hybridization process changed the gluten or the protein structure, and it's almost only a cast iron gut that can break down that very complex protein or gluten structure. That explains why so many people are gluten intolerant today. The 1990s, every pasta, every pizza, every biscuit, cake, cookie, donut, cereal, bread, it's all made out of the hybridized wheat. You see, the farmers love it, and I don't blame them for loving it because they get 6 times more grain per acre. It was zoomed through to help with the starvation crisis in the world, and safety studies were never done. This explains the gluten intolerance that we see today. The 2 most common symptoms of a gluten intolerance is brain fog and bloating.
Third acid-forming food is caffeine.
Caffeine, all your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect.
A diet heavy in acidic foods like animal protein, caffeine, and processed products strains the body's systems responsible for maintaining pH balance. The additional buffering needed can deplete essential alkaline minerals such as sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, increasing the risk of chronic and degenerative diseases. Therefore, It's crucial to consume these foods in moderation.
And of course, caffeine usually comes hand in hand with the sugar, which certainly ups it. And remember our 2.6 Coca-Cola, that's a combination of the caffeine and the sugar. 2.6. This is where Coca-Cola sits. It's a killer. It's toxic.
Fourth acid-forming food.
Refined sugar. It's very acid-forming.
Although sugar itself has a neutral pH of 7, it is classified as an acid-forming food due to its impact on the body's pH during metabolism. Once consumed, sugar is mainly processed by the liver, creating byproducts like lactic acid and acetic acid, which increase the body's acid levels. Furthermore, sugar metabolism depletes vital alkaline minerals such as calcium, magnesium, and potassium, which are needed to buffer and neutralize acids. Excessive sugar intake also triggers insulin release, leading to the loss of these minerals through urine, contributing to higher acidity. Additionally, sugar disrupts the gut microbiome by encouraging the growth of acid-producing bacteria, further increasing the acid load. Finally, inflammation caused by sugar generates acidic byproducts, worsening the body's overall acidic state. A surprisingly acid-forming item on the list is the fifth food.
Aged cheese. What's the blue in the blue vein cheese? The blue in the blue vein cheese is mold. So the only cheeses that don't sit under that category, the cheeses that have probably a pH of 7 would be your fresh. So that's your cottage, your ricotta. I'm not saying that they are okay, because usually they come from cows who have not been fed right or have chemicals in them.
Dairy products are typically regarded as acid-forming foods. This classification is based on the potential renal acid load, PRAL, which assesses the acid or alkaline impact of foods on the body after digestion and metabolism. Foods rich in protein and phosphorus, like dairy, are more likely to be acid-forming. As these foods are metabolized, they generate acidic compounds that the body must neutralize or excrete, increasing the acid burden on the kidneys. Here are some examples of how typical dairy products are categorized based on their acid-forming potential. Milk is mildly acid-forming. Cheese ranges from moderately to highly acid-forming, depending on the variety. Yogurt is also mildly acid-forming. It's important to understand that whether a food is acid-forming or alkaline-forming doesn't directly determine its health benefits or disadvantages. Maintaining a balanced diet that incorporates both acid-forming and alkaline-forming foods is crucial for overall health. Alcohol is the sixth acid-forming food.
Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment in the body. Tobacco is not a food, but it also creates an acid environment in the body. Alcohol breaks down in the body to acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is a neurotoxin. We don't want a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin is a brain killer.
Do you need to completely eliminate acid-forming foods? The good news is that it's not necessary to avoid them entirely.
To maintain the 6.5 environment, we need to be consuming 20% acid-forming foods and 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. And I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say that the 20% should come from this section here. All your other grains, other than the grains that sit on the alkaline side, all your other legumes, other than the lima, lentil and soy, and all your other nuts, other than the almond and Brazil,